Ladies and gentlemen, I am Tosh Berman, and this is Tosh Talks. And I'm going to talk about a French band by the name of Rita Mitsouko. Rita Mitsouko was really a duo, a man and a woman, Catherine Ringer and Fred Chichin. And those two make Rita Mitsouko. And I discovered Rita Mitsouko not through the radio or through a club actually I first heard of them from a very specific friend and someone who I looked up highly due to his sense of style and his friendship, but also I admired his work and I admired his personality greatly. And his name is Eric Blum. And Eric Blum, at the time, was a photographer. He photographed the cover of the Sparks' Inks in My Pants. And I know he's done other album covers, but I think the Sparks, that one Sparks album, his work with that one album stays in my mind. He did some fashion work and commercial work, as well as some like art photography. But he always, to me, had a sense of glamour. And in my own vision or fantasy, I always thought of him as a Los Angeles version of David Bailey. But he isn't. He's Eric Blum. And one day I was in Eric Blum's house, apartment on Wilshire Boulevard, in a very sort of 1940s or 1930s apartment. And at the time he had no furniture. He had a bed. I don't recall him even having chairs, but he had a hi-fi. And he had some records. He didn't have a lot of records, but he had some records. And one album he did have was this album by Rita Mitsouko. And actually, it's this album. Not the same album that he owned. Many years later, I purchased my own copy. In fact, I purchased many versions of this album. But this is called No Comprendo. And I believe this is number 2 of the Rita Mitsouko album, their second album. And what they have put out is, in order, is Rita Mitsouko by Rita Mitsouko, then No Comprendo, then Marc and Robert, a 12-inch single. And then their last album they made together as a duo is Variety. And the reason they split up is because Fred Chichin, unfortunately, tragically died, I believe, from cancer. But eventually, a couple of years later after the passing, Catherine Ringer started making her own records, her solo albums. And it's called Ring and Roll. Not rock and roll, but Ring and Roll. And this very, very recent album, this came a couple of months ago, called Chronicles and Fantaisies, her last solo album, Catherine Ringer. And I'm going to try to describe why I love Rita Mitsouko so much. Well, first of all, when Eric, who is the most stylish person I knew at the time, plays me something new, I know that it has to be really good. So he played me this record, and instantly I loved it. And at the time, I was not really aware of French music. I was not aware of French yeye music, or Serge Gainsbourg, or Johnny Hallyday, or Jacques Durand, or Francois Hardy, or Franz Gall. All those people were totally almost unknown to me. I may have known their name by passing, but I don't know anything about their music or culture. On the other hand, I was a huge fan of French literature, but I knew nothing about French music. And Rita Mitsouko were, and still is, a very popular band or music in France and in parts of Europe as well. Not that well known in the English-speaking world, which is a total shame. It's so easy, I think. Well, it's easy for me to fall in love with this band because this band hit all the right spots for me. And when I first heard No Comprendo album, at Eric's house. It reminded me a little bit of Sparks at the time, but a lot of T-Rex. And it was like a little bit later I realized that Tony Visconti produced No Comprendo album. So they worked with Tony Visconti, and I guess in my mind that's sort of the Sparks T-Rex sound. But as I get more familiar with Rita Mitsouko, I don't think T-Rex is that big of an influence. It's more, I think of Iggy Pop. And I think of Catherine Ringer as a French, she's like Edith Piaf if she was fronting the Stooges. And that's the image I think you should have. Edith Piaf, the great French chanteuse, sort of tragic, sparrow bird, French songbird of the 30s and 40s and then the 50s, if she was fronting the Stooges. And it's not to mean that the music is basic or riff-oriented like the Stooges, but Catherine Ringer's attitude is very French, of course, but very rock and roll at the same time. I guess in the essence, French rock and roll. And French rock and roll could mean a lot of things. Well, it means to me that it's definitely the French, it seems all French musicians has a respect for show business of some sort. So many like French rock people are very visual, which I love because I love the visual medium of rock and roll a lot. And the Rita Mitsouko are very much of a band that sort of embraced the fashion industry as well as music. And when they first started out, especially in the No Comprendo period, they pretty much hung out and worked with Jean-Paul Gaultier at the time. And this was the height of Jean-Paul Gaultier. It was during the 80s. The Rita Mitsouko was sort of the house band of Jean-Paul Gaultier of sorts. And so there's that sort of high fashion, but really cool. And then you have Rita Mitsouko. So you have Fred Chichin, who played guitar, some percussion. Catherine Ringer handled the bass and keyboards and the main vocalist. So when you hear Rita Mitsouko, it's very much, even though they use electronic instruments like synthesizers and stuff, it sounds very much like a live band, even though it's just them dubbing all the instruments on one recording. And in all her work, and all their work, there is a real band essence to their music. There's like real instrumentation, real drums, real guitar, keyboards, bass. And they're kind of funky, but always have a groove. And again, there is this sort of like this driven like Iggy Pop, Stooges era focus. And their videos, their visual sense are probably one of the best music videos ever. I mean, their videos are exquisite in execution and in style and theme. There's one song, I can't remember what it is, but they did a whole like Bollywood movie. They did like a 10-minute Bollywood movie with Catherine and Frank, this sort of being like Bollywood stars. And they shot it in India with the other Indian actors and actresses. And in theory, this sounds like this would be a total disaster or something terrible, but it's both incredibly charming and the music is so fantastic and the direction and the visuals is like perfect. And Catherine Ringer's and Fred Chichin's aesthetic seems to be always on a perfection level. So in that sense, they are very much like Iggy Pop or like Bowie. And I guess if you're going to compare them to some French stars or French entertainers, it would be, again, Edith Piaf and maybe a touch of Serge Gainsbourg. But Catherine Ringer would be like the bratty granddaughter of Serge Gainsbourg. And her appeal to me is one of great charm and personality. That's the other essence I like about French pop music, is that you really you get Gainsbourg's character, or you get like Jacques Deronc's character or Francois Hardy's character very strong. When you hear the music, their characters comes up to you. And I think it's very much part of the French music tradition. It's like their life. It's not like a separation of life and private life. It's like they sort of walk out of their bedroom, from their bed to the stage. There's no like dressing room. It's just like got out of bed and right in front of the audience. And Catherine Ringer has that appeal. There's something incredibly fresh and not like over-intellectualized about her approach to her work. And she's a remarkable singer. And she's remarkable not only because she has a great voice. She's not like a David Bowie trained voice, but more of a voice of character. In essence, just like Iggy Pop is not a great voice, but you get Iggy Pop's character. And the same with Serge Gainsbourg, you get that sense of character when they sing. And Catherine Ringer, just by her stage presence, which is very kind of free, very kind of rock and roll, but very also in the tradition of like Edith Piaf and other great French music stars. She doesn't stand out from them. She just actually brings a more prominent, more, maybe even a better version. You know, it's like she's staying in that tradition, but she's just actually, her work is very tight and very, very, very focused and very just incredibly brilliant. And so Rita Mitsouko been around for many, many years, very much of a self-unit, this Fred and her and Catherine, and they had children. I don't know if they were married, but they were a long-term couple and a working couple. And so when Fred died, it was really terrible because, although in France, I'm sure it was a huge news, but when he died, it was like, I'm like the only person in the world, I felt like, who was into Rita Mitsouko, who felt this tragedy of his passing. And I thought maybe Catherine Ringer is going to quit or retire or not do it anymore. I think she just took like a 6-month vacation or 6 months off. And, you know, Variety, the album, this got released right before Fred Chichin passed away. And I don't know if they actually did a tour for this album because he might have been too sick for it. I think basically his cancer, I think it was cancer, was found out like 6 months before he passed away. So when he found out he was ill to his death, it was a very short period of time. And this album does not have like a black star, David Bowie's Black Star. You don't have a feeling that presence of death or the end of anything. It's just a great Rita Mitsouko album. And so when he passed away, I think like 6-7 months later, Catherine Ringer kept the rest of the band, their live band, and she just went on the road as Catherine Ringer sings the Rita Mitsouko, which is amazing. There's a live album and a DVD of the performances of that tour, and I can't imagine how hard it must be for her to sing about her husband's music or the music they made together so soon after his passing. But you know, people mourn death differently. Some takes years, some take a year, some take 6 months. And this may be her way of mourning his passing, but also celebration of the music they made together. And watching that DVD, I remember being really sad because it's definitely, his presence is incredibly missed. But also, I was so impressed about her spirit and about how she just kept on going and just giving all the songs all she has. It's just a brilliant performance. So Catherine Ringer has made many. She didn't really start doing a solo recording until a little bit much later, but she did like one-off records with people. She even did a duet with Iggy Pop and other French stars. Or I actually saw a video of like a huge Johnny Holiday concert, and he invited Catherine Ringer to do a song together. And in the French music world, combining talents together is not uncommon. Anyway, Catherine Ringer released 2 albums, Ring and Roll. And it's just as strong, surprisingly, it's just as strong as a Rita Mitsouko album. And it's her working with Marc Robert, who is a guitarist and a producer, worked with David Bowie. He produced the album Toy, which never was officially released by David Bowie, but also worked on Heathen and I think other Bowie records afterwards, including Hours. And also where he worked with Lisa Germano. And his presence on the Rita Mitsouko, you do get his production skills and his sensibility when I listen to the Catherine Ringer, I do think of like sort of like late period David Bowie. And Catherine Ringer herself is like a presence that's always not just youthful, because it's not youthful, because she's aged, obviously, you know, over the years. And she doesn't hide her aging. That's another great thing about Catherine Ringer. But the fact that she is just a spirit, she really has a rock and roll spirit. Like Iggy Pop has that rock and roll spirit, Catherine Ringer has that rock and roll spirit. And there's very few people who, in my mind, who successfully or not successfully in the commercial market. You know, I think of like Gene Vincent, I think of Vince Taylor, you know, I think of like Marianne Faithfull, I think of course, Bowie and Iggy Pop. They're like these really strong characters that exist no matter what happens. The world could die out, yet there will always be a Gene Vincent, there'll always be a Vince Taylor, there'll always be a Bowie, there'll always be Iggy, and Catherine Ringer is in that category as an entertainer and an artist. Trying to locate her records is not impossible, but you have to hunt around. I got some of her recordings for like Amoeba Records, but you can find her stuff online, as well as Rita Mitsouko. Again, Tony Visconti produced them, as well as Conny Plank, who worked with the German band Can and other krautrock artists. So they worked with great people, and the musicians, they did work live as well as a little bit in the studio. We're all fantastic musicians, and it shows because there is that band feeling, even when there's two of them playing together, overdubbing, you know, all the instruments. So Rita Mitsouko, excellent. Catherine Ringer, excellent. And I strongly, strongly recommend that you out there get their music. And also, if you check them up on YouTube, they have a lot of videos on YouTube as well. You can hear bits and pieces of their music, or even sometimes their whole album. I strongly suggest that you investigate the world of Catherine Ringer. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly, it's Ringer, and Rita Mitsouko. And this is Tosh Talks, and I'm Tosh Berman. Goodbye.